Hello there everyone, Nubkeks here, and in this week's beta update video, we're checking out a whole bunch of class updates, particularly focused on a lot of the Covenant abilities this week. Let's just dive right into this. We're going to start off with the Death Knight, and no, this week we're not looking at yet another update to the Unholy DK. Instead, we're looking at a Covenant ability change, and this is a big one, right? So Death's Due, the Night Fae Covenant ability, has been reworked, and for the most part, massively nerfed. This was looking to be by far the strongest one in practice for the DKs. This is the new version now. So this has still got to replace your Death and Decay, or upgrade your Death and Decay. It's going to do shadow damage over 10 seconds to targets in the area. The new effect now is that while you are within the area, for Unholy or Scourge Strike, it's going to hit up to 4 enemies near the target and inflict Death's Due for 12 seconds. For Blood, that's going to be your Heart Strike is going to hit 4 enemies near the target and inflict Death's Due. Each stack of Death's Due will reduce the enemy's damage dealt to you by 1%. It stacks to a maximum of 8%, and then it transfers that power to you as an equal amount of strength. So the more damage reduction you put on them, the more strength that you get. This is compared to the old version. The old version used to simply, it would stack up to 15% damage reduction and transfer to you, and it would just stack every time the ability itself dealt damage. So just by enemies standing in Death's Due, they were losing damage to you and giving you strength. So this is a massive nerf. Like, the cap is down by half, and of course now that it's based off of your Scourge Strikes or Heart Strikes, you're going to be able to stack this up much worse. I mean, I'm not even going to worry too much about this here. You can see, I don't even know if it's going to work properly against these guys because they're target dummies, but you're not going to get all that many. It's got to be tough, I think, to actually get 8 Scourge Strikes out during the Death's Due. Though at least, you know, I guess the debuff will persist for a little while afterwards, like 12 seconds afterwards. So you can build it up for those 10 seconds, and then you're going to have that strength bonus and the damage reduction persist for 12 seconds after. I mean, I think it's okay. This certainly becomes a much less attractive Covenant overall, though. I would say it's going to be good for some big AoE burst damage, like if you're able to ramp it up for those 12 seconds in Death's Due, and then pop a bunch of epidemics for Unholy, do lots of damage. But yeah, it's definitely not as strong as it was before, I don't think. However, for Frost, this has a new effect, which makes it much better, much better for Frost, right? So for the Frost Death Knight, the new Death's Due, while you're within the area of your Death's Due, your Obliterate will hit up to 1 additional target and inflict Death's Due for 12 seconds. Okay, so suddenly this for Frost Death Knight becomes a massively powerful 2-target cleave cooldown. Massively powerful. Again, it still has the same, each stack of Death's Due is 1%, less damage from the target, and 1% more strength for you. So that's pretty powerful, but this becomes extremely strong, obviously, with an Obliterate build, right? Where you're constantly going to be generating runes and spamming out Obliterates. That's going to be very powerful, and especially so with the two-handed playstyle as well, which is, of course, for Frost, is going to be upping the damage of your Obliterate by 35%, right? So cleaving those Obliterates with two-handed Frost is going to be super strong. I think this definitely presents a big contrast for Frost DK. We're going to test it out now in a second, where you're going to, I think if you're looking to play a two-handed Frost DK, I think that this Covenant, this Death's Due ability becomes super attractive, because now you're going, okay, hey, I'm a two-handed Frost DK. I've got really good single target damage, and I've got insanely good 2-target cleave with these cleaving Obliterates. I'm really good at that. That is what I'm strong at. Bring me for that. Whereas a dual-wielding Frost DK is probably more likely, I think, going for Venthyr now. Going for the Venthyr, getting the runic power generation and going, yo, I have the Venthyr ability. This does big AoE. By dual-wielding Frost, I just do more damage with my Frost spells, for example, in AoE. And I'm obviously going to go for Breath of Sindragosa, which is also going to work for more bigger scale AoE and AoE burst. And I think that's a cool contrast. All right, let's give this a go. This is take 2 because I fucked it up the first time. I forgot that they removed a bunch of stuff from GCD and got confused. Well, I don't know. Let's just we'll summon in our ghoul. Let's go. Put on our Frost Fever. We'll pop our Frost thing. Here we go. This is going down. And we're going to spam out. Here we go. Some Obliterates. Let's go. Spend our runic power. Throwing out our rhymes whenever we can. Trying to get those guys to cleave. Okay, cool. We should fire off our Frostworm. Awesome. And great. And roughly speaking, if we look at our overall damage breakdown, you can see our Frostworm's Fury obviously hitting 2 targets. with that stacked up strength from our Death's Due. Though again, I'm not actually, to be honest, I'm not sure. You guys could have watched the buffs. I don't think that Death's Due actually works against target dummies. You get the idea though. But that did a good chunk of damage. Obviously, Obliterate did loads of damage there, hitting multiple targets. Frost Fever, Remorseless Winter doing decent as well. But you can see just how much damage is in that Obliterate and that Frostwyrm's Fury. So I think that this looks, really good for Frost DK. I mean, that being said, though, I think that overall, if I was going to be playing a Death Knight myself, I think that this change, I was already hesitant on Death's Due myself, simply because it's not that good for PvP, right? It's not that good for PvP. And for me, I personally like playing all the sorts of different content in the game. I do have to say that Venthyr stands out to me now as being quite good for the Death Knight. That would probably be my go-to choice right now. Because the Venthyr ability, very simply, it's going to be a 1 minute cooldown, it's going to do AoE damage, and it's going to generate runic power. It also gives you dodge chance. When you put a conduit on it, the burst damage and the dodge chance go way up. So I think certainly for Blood DK, Swarming Mist is a short cooldown. It gives you a big burst of survivability, big burst of runic power to spend on Death Strike. For Frost DK, it's a big burst of runic power to spend on Frost Strike as well, which is okay-ish. It's okay-ish, but more importantly, it's to spend on Breath of Syndragosa for Frost and Dual Wield Frost. And I'm happy to play that build. I know that other people prefer the two-handed and might go for the Night Fae instead. Or then for Unholy DK, obviously, you know, Burst AoE, that's kind of their jam, right? And that's going to fuel their epidemic and be really good. So I'm kind of leaning a bit more towards Venthyr now with Death Knight myself, but you guys let me know what you think, and especially you guys who are actually Death Knight experts. What do you think? What are the sims now showing? What are the Death Knight experts now saying? Because this is a massive change to what has been the best covenant for PvE for all Death Knight specs for basically the entire beta so far. Over on the Demon Hunter then, they've had substantial changes to all of their covenant abilities. I think the Necklord one is still looking a bit weak. Obviously, Fodder to the Flame. There's a 2 minute cooldown, right? So this is now going to give you... it's actually bugged. The tooltip's bugged here. So when you are fighting within the pool... So let me just summon it in, right? So we're going to fight this demon. Hello, demon. I have no idea where any of the buttons are on this bar. This is a new character, so we're just gonna click. We're clicker now. We're clicker now. There we go. We get our pool, right? So we're in the pool, and you get your buff, right? You get your buff. When you fight within that pool, this formerly increased your attack speed by 20% while you're in the pool. What it's now going to do, I don't know if this tooltip... Yeah, this tooltip works. It now increases your haste by 10% instead, which is a much better buff overall. So haste is obviously going to reduce your GCD. It's going to reduce the cooldowns of a lot of your abilities. It's going to make certain dots and stuff tick faster, though I don't know if that's going to affect the Demon Hunter too much. It affects Sinful Brand quite a bit, but obviously you can have Sinful Brand and Fodder to the Flame at the same time. So yeah, I think that's a nice little buff. I'm not certain, though, that that is anywhere near enough to make Fodder to the Flame actually good. For the Venthyr, they've actually buffed the damage of Sinful Brand, right? Sinful Brand now does even more damage. So it's going to do 5,700 damage now over 8 seconds, again, in this terrible starter character gear. Of course, with Sinful Brand, its damage does scale with haste. So if I generate some haste here we go. See that damage with haste? Obviously, the 15% haste I'm getting from Furious Gaze and the Metamorphosis haste, that goes up to 8,200 shadow damage, right? We lose Metamorphosis, it goes down to 6,600. We lose Furious Gaze back down to 5,700. So Sinful Brand remains, I think, extremely powerful in single target. They've also changed the hunt, though, to try to make it better in single target. So this is, the cooldown just got halved. It's now down to a 1.5 minute cooldown, which is nice. So you're going to charge to your target, do 4,600 nature damage, root them in place for 1.5 seconds, and do 4,600 nature damage over 6 seconds to up to 5 enemies in your path. Let's actually hit some enemies in our path, shall we? Let's do it. Oh, we're going to hit this guy. This guy's about to get messed up. So obviously looks cool. It doesn't put the debuff on him, though, which is unfortunate. It does put the debuff on him, but not on your actual target. So that's definitely a bummer. That's definitely a bummer. It's also now going to invigorate your soul, healing you for 25% of the damage you deal to the hunt target for 30 seconds. So again, that debuff got halved to go along with the half duration cooldown. So overall, I certainly think this is a buff. I think that's a buff. This does have some uses, I would say, for PvP. Like every minute and a half, it's a 50-yard range, right? So it's every 1.5 minutes, you do a big target swap in PvP or chase somebody down. Does a good chunk of upfront burst damage, roots them for a little bit of time as well, and you're going to heal for damage you deal to them. It's okay. I mean, Sinful Brand, though, still, it's kind of weird. They said in the developer post on this that they buffed the hunt to compete more with Sinful Brand, but then they also buffed Sinful Brand's damage in the exact same thing. So Sinful Brand still does way more damage in single target, and obviously it applies with Metamorphosis as well. It lowers casting and attack speed, which I didn't talk about when I looked at it. I was just looking at the damage. But I think just purely from the damage that it does, Sinful Brand is still straight up better than the Hunt. And I mean, with Soul Shape and with the Hunt, I don't really think you need all that mobility as a Havoc Demon Hunter, in my opinion. And then with Akirian, this is, for me, the most exciting thing, because Elysian Decree just got buffed as well. So Elysian Decree is now going to do 3,500 arcane damage to everything that it hits, right? Everything that it hits. So we throw it down. Hadouken. Boom. It explodes, shatters off those 3 souls. And yeah, 3,500 damage to up to 3 targets. So compare it to Sinful Brand. They're both on the 1 minute cooldown. I think that Elysian Decree at 2 targets now is arguably better, right? Sinful Brand, obviously, it with the haste scaling is what pulls Sinful Brand up more. And Sinful Brand will still be stronger in single target. But even once you get to 2 targets, right? This is doing 5,500. This is doing 3,500, so 7,000 to 2 targets versus 5,500. Obviously, with haste, this becomes equal. But yeah, you're kind of juggling the benefits then. Obviously, this gets an extra application with meta. This gets, it also lowers casting speed and melee attack speed, which is nice. This has the added benefit, though, of course, of those 3 lesser soul fragments, which are going to heal you for a good chunk of health. And with Havoc, with Demonic Appetite, they're going to give you 30 Fury each. It's going to give you 90 Fury every time you press this. That's a lot of Fury that you can funnel into your Chaos Strikes or whatever. Yeah, like that's a pretty big deal. So for me, this is even a bigger deal for Vengeance. Of course, this is even better for Vengeance, because with Vengeance, Spirit Bomb, your talent, is all about generating soul fragments to then fire them off as the Spirit Bomb, which is your biggest source of damage, actually. So Elysian Decree, obviously the healing is even more powerful for you as the Vengeance. It's even more relevant, and it's going to do more damage there. So yeah, I think that with these changes, I get what they're trying to do. I don't think they've done a good job, though, in this particular patch of balancing them. I think Fodder to the Flame, moving it to haste is a good idea. I feel like it's still too weak, though. The Venthyr Sinful Brand still looks really good. It looks like the best single target one. But Elysian Decree is really pulling ahead. This is now, for me, the #1 pick for Demon Hunter. I don't really care about whatever Soul Shape or Door of Shadows. They got plenty of mobility as Demon Hunter. Don't need those. I'll take, though, the Self-Dispel of the Steward Vial. I think that's good. I think Elysian Decree looks phenomenal. And like I said in my Demon Hunter review video a couple of days ago, I think that Demon Hunter plays at its best in dungeons, in world content, in AoE scenarios. And that's where Elysian Decree is best. That's where Demon Hunter is best. I think it has such nice synergies with the spec, and it's fun to play with as well. I think this, for me, is the way to go. So there you go. That's my thoughts on the Demon Hunter changes. For the Restoration Druid, they've had some changes to their legendary effects. So first of all, Memory of the Mother Tree has been buffed substantially. This now has a 50% chance whenever you do Wild Growth to make your next Rejuve or Regrowth apply to 3 additional allies within 20 yards of the target. So this got massively buffed. This was formerly a 25% chance to apply to 2 additional allies. So this is just massively stronger across the board. The Swiftmend legendary Verdant Infusion got nerfed, which I think is fair. So Swiftmend no longer consumes a heal over time effect and extends the duration of your heal over time effects on the target now by 6 seconds. This was formerly 10 seconds. It was a little bit ridiculous. Obviously, I was running this in the dungeons with Cenarion Ward, so you could make Cenarion Ward be an 18-second heal over time instead of an 8-second, which was obviously insane. So yeah, that has been nerfed down. It's still very, very good though. And then finally, the Dark Titan's Lesson has been nerfed again. You may Life Bloom 2 targets at once, and Life Bloom's final healing is increased by 25%. So yeah, I mean, obviously Life Bloom itself is a very powerful heal over time, so that's totally fine. And of course, it's going to be fueling your clear casting, giving you free regrowths more often. It synergizes really well with photosynthesis. So yeah, I think this is still a good legendary. But I think this does put... I feel like Vision of Unending Growth seems a little bit underwhelming, but the other ones now, I think all look very, very strong. So I think a good, hopefully balancing set of changes for the Resto Druid legendaries. Over on our non-demon hunter brethren, our regular hunters, a couple of nice little perks for them. So first of all, Cobra Shot has been reverted to its original 35 focus cost, going down from the 45 focus that it had been sitting at in Shadowlands for basically all of beta. This is the BFA level. I believe it was the Legion level as well, so this feels a lot better. Your spec is just it's gonna flow smoother. You're gonna get more Cobra shots out. That's a big deal. This obviously buffs things like Spitting Cobra or Killer Cobra, which are more about that, and just makes your focus economy a little bit better as BM. So that is a positive thing. They have also changed several of the Covenant abilities though for the Hunter. The first one, Resonating Arrow, this now has a bigger area of effect. As you can see, it's much bigger than it was before. I don't want to hit this guy. It also does, I think, a small bit of damage when you initially fire it out. So yeah, much larger area of effect, much more usable. That is a wonderful buff to what was already looking, in my opinion, like a fairly strong Covenant ability, particularly, you know, looking a little bit later into the, like maybe not on launch, but certainly once you go a little bit later in the expansion, I feel like the scaling of this thing would be really strong with secondary stats. On top of this, though, it also has another effect, another little perk to it as well, which is when a target leaves the area of the echoing anima, it will leave a debuff on them for 4 seconds, which still lets you do the ignore line of sight thing, right? So you know the way that Resonating Arrow lets you ignore line of sight. Here we go. So I can shoot dudes like through the wall, like no problem. It looks like maybe I have to be hitting them. You can see the second debuffs are ticking away there. Maybe it's just a bit bugged. I don't think... Oh, no, it will. It will actually persist after this. So I can keep shooting this guy through the wall for 4 seconds after the Resonating Arrow expires. I don't know if it's supposed to do that. I don't know if the line of sight thing is supposed to persist for like 4 seconds after. But the idea with this one in particular is for PvP. I think this is particularly for PvP. When with the bigger area, you can throw it down on a pillar, and it'll be much easier for to actually catch people in that around the pillar in arena. And with the debuff persisting, it's going to let you just attack through that pillar much more consistently. So yeah, I think that's a really nice buff, and it's a great Covenant ability. Great news then for lots of hunters, which is that the Wild Spirits Covenant has been slightly reworked. Slightly reworked, guys. Evoke the energy of wild spirits at the target location, doing 280 nature damage, applying Hunter's Mark to all enemies within the area for 15 seconds. That's already kind of nice, right? You get extra, essentially 5% damage against everything that you're cleaving, so that's okay. I think it already had that functionality, mind you. While wild spirits are active, each damaging ability you or your pet use against a target in the area will strike up to 5 nearby targets for 500 nature damage. Not bad. Let's actually test it out here. So one thing that's worth noting, actually, as we go in to test this out, is that you can do single target abilities, you can do AoE abilities. It doesn't matter. Just whenever you or your pet use an ability, essentially the thing on the ground is just going to explode and pulse that damage. So that's kind of nice. Like, you can keep single target tunneling. Let's say, again, typical, my favorite Mythic Plus example, you pull the Captain of the Guard and his 4 shitty guardsmen, and it's Sanguine or something like that. So you don't want to kill the guardsman early and heal up the Captain of the Guard. Absolute disaster. Huge time waste. You want to kill the Captain of the Guard around the same time as the guardsman. Pop Wild Spirits down, tunnel single target into the guardsman. Wild Spirits will help cleave down the little guardsman. You hitting the Captain of the Guard will help finish him off. Let's roughly speaking, let's try this out. Let's get our pets in there first, I guess. We'll fire off against a couple of these. Then let's go. Here we go. So I'm just kind of curious how much it does. So you can see every time I'm firing off an ability. And again, actually nice enough with the BM Hunter, with the reduced focus cost, we can really spam out our abilities a lot more. So that's lovely. I'm kind of curious how much damage this is going to have done as we come to an end of it. So right there, Wild Spirits just did a massive chunk of damage. That just did about 22k damage, which is an awful lot right there in that burst of AoE. So I think this one is quite interesting for the BM Hunter. Obviously, it's still good in single target. It's still fine in single target. But, you know, I mean, hey, if you add 5 targets, it's doing 5 times as much damage, right? So, yeah, this one is very much AoE focused. And this probably stands out as a very good AoE Covenant. Interesting then whether it will compete with like the Flight Shot or the Death Chakram, which are basically pure single target, or with the Kyrian one, which works for AoE and single target. I'm curious what the new sims are going to show. This is a big improvement. This ability was previously riddled with bugs, so it's great to see that works again. With the Venthyr, for them in particular, I'm actually going to switch to marksmanship for this. But the Venthyr, the Flight Shot, has been slightly buffed as well. So whenever this procs, the Flight Shot can proc a free kill shot. That kill shot is now going to be focus free. So instead of having a 10 focus cost, it's free. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but it actually is. For the Marksmanship Hunter in particular, you are quite focus starved. And with Deadeye especially, which gives Killshot 2 charges, and importantly, makes aim shot recharge 60% faster when you do a kill shot. That is a big focus cost, right? Because the aim shot itself is expensive. Obviously, aim shot gives you procs, which are expensive. So I mean, if we did, like, let's roughly speaking test this out. Here we go. We'll fire this off. We're not going to do any big cooldowns or anything like that. We're just going to mostly do this stuff. So I have to kind of look up here. I'm not used to having my unit frames on my add-ons and stuff reset. I was fiddling around. So there we go. Free kill shot. Pretty cool. You can see how quickly my aim shot is recovering. Get that fired off. Nice. Not bad. Not bad at all. So that's sort of what's going on right there, which is quite fun. So yeah, it's a small buff, but I think it's a nice buff. It's small, but nice. You can see that, you know, my focus does go fairly low on this hunter spec. So yeah, nice little perk there. Gonna help you use those kill shots just as soon as they proc. Makes it even better in execute as well then. So yeah, I think it's a pretty big win, especially for Marksmanship Hunter. I'm trying to bring this one up to compete more with the Necrolord thing. With Necrolord, it's just one small change. They made Death Chakram, they just bug fixed it so that, I mean, it's still going to bounce around and stuff, but it's not going to bounce to crowd control targets anymore and break them out of crowd control. So that's a nice buff. That's a nice perk. So yeah, there you go. There are the changes to the Hunter. Over in the land of mages, we have a couple of big Covenant changes as well. Actually, a small one first, which is Radiant Spark. Now does a bit more damage over time, and the debuff that it puts on now lasts for 10 seconds. So this is quite a nice little perk. For example, this now works a lot better with Touch of the Magi, which is a nice little tweak for Arcane in particular, right? You put on your Radiant Spark, pop on your Touch of the Magi, and then those, as you see, the two debuffs are sort of persisting and going well together, which is cool. I believe that it still doesn't properly work with Arcane Missiles. The Arcane Missile still consumes all the charges, and obviously this being a 30-second cooldown, you have to delay it for Touch of the Magi, but still, that is a nice quality of life improvement that makes that flow a lot better. So that's a small thing, and shout out to Blizzard for fixing that. The big thing, of course, that people are going to be discussing, though, is a massive update to Mirrors of Torment. Previously an ability that relied on exploiting its conduit to be extremely strong in PvE. That conduit obviously has got nerfed down a lot, but this was mostly going to be a thing that worked only in PvP, because it was based off of spell attacks. This has now been changed. So now you conjure three mirrors on your target, but now whenever the target does a melee attack, cast a spell or ability, it will consume a mirror to do damage. It also slows their move speed and cast speed. The third mirror, the final one, does more damage. It will also root and silence that target for 4 seconds. So that is a nice perk. Before we jump into the spec-specific little buffs here at the very bottom of the tooltip, first of all, with the physical attacks, with the melee attacks, there is a 6-second internal global cooldown implemented there, right? So it will only trigger a mirror every 6 seconds based off of melee attacks. And they've also therefore increased the duration of the mirror from 20 seconds. The buff formerly was only 20 seconds. Now it's 25 seconds. But yeah, that's obviously a massive increase. I mean, the big concern, of course, initially when we saw this, and it was just based off of spells, was, well, raid bosses don't necessarily cast spells. Lots of mobs and dungeons don't necessarily cast spells. What if I'm in an arena and I'm fighting against, I mean, 2 rogues who don't cast spells? Pretty bad. I guess it would go off their abilities, but still, this now proccing off of physical attacks, basic attacks, that works really well. You're going to get this up very consistently in PvE, so that's wonderful, wonderful. On top of that, there are also these spec-specific effects. So for Arcane Mage, whenever a mirror is consumed, you gain 4% mana. That's not bad. That's not bad. That's going to help fuel your damage, because obviously Arcane Mage is all about fueling the damage. For the Fire Mage, for anyone who is left playing Fire Mage in Shadowlands, the mirror effect for them is whenever a mirror is consumed, your Fire Blast cooldown is reduced by 4 seconds. That's pretty good too. Pretty nice. For the Frost Mage, whenever a mirror is consumed, I believe it's going to generate not Fingers of Frost, a Brain Freeze. Yeah, it's going to give you a Brain Freeze, which is obviously what lets you instant cast your Flurry and fuels your whole Shatter combo. So this is really good. I mean, getting 3 Brain Freezes out of your Mirrors of Torment, getting 12 seconds of cooldown reduction on Fire Blast out of each one, or getting, 12% mana back for an Arcane Mage out of each one. I think this makes Mirrors of Torment much more appealing. So Venthyr mages for PvE is now very much a reality, and could be a very attractive option. So there you go, mages. Good news for you. For monks, first up, I want to look at the Mistweaver Legendary, the Tear of Mourning. This has been very, very much nerfed. The new effect is that Renewing Mists will increase your healing done to the target by 15% for 12 seconds. This was formerly increasing all healing done to the target, which is a bit weird. Now it's only yours, which makes more sense. And also 25% of your Enveloping Mist and Vivify healing is also applied to all targets with Tear of Mourning. That's been nerfed from, I believe, 50%. So yeah, a massive nerf to Tear of Mourning. That makes sense in my opinion, because this is just way too strong in comparison to the other legendaries like the Fist Weaving Legendary or Yu'lon's Whisper or Clouded Focus. These ones are, I think, are relatively dull. Tear of Mourning definitely stood miles above the pack for Mistweaver Monk in practice. I think being nerfed down, it still looks really strong, but yeah, there's definitely a big nerf to that for the Mistweaver. For ye old Windwalker Monk, then, there's quite a few little updates for Windwalker, which is good news for them. First of all, in the talent section, Energizing Elixir, this is now off of the GCD, right? So, going to give you 2 Chi and regen a bunch of energy over 5 seconds. That being removed from GCD makes it a much more attractive option. So that's cool. I still really like Fist of the White Tiger myself. That's more fun, but yeah, this competes better with Ascension and that. So yeah, Energizing Elixir love. Spinning Crane Kick is now going to do more damage. So the unique effect here at the bottom, Spinning Crane Kick's damage increased by 10% for each unique target you struck in the last 10 seconds with Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, or Rising Sun Kick. That can now stack up to 6 times. That's up from 5 times. So essentially an extra 10% damage from Spinning Crane Kick if you can, you know, multi-target properly in AoE, or of course just have your Storm, Earth, and Fire dudes help you out and build up those stacks quickly. More AoE damage, that is lovely. Haste is going to affect the Crackling Jade Tiger Lightning, so you're gonna cast Crackling Jade Lightning faster. So that's nice, I suppose. More importantly, though, we have a couple of tweaks to their Covenant abilities. I need to zoom out. Being a gnome is difficult. So, for the Kyrian, their Weapons of Order has been reworked for Windwalker, which is good. So, for the next 30 seconds, your mastery is increased by 13%. Additionally, Rising Sun Kick reduces chi costs by 1 for 5 seconds, and Blackout Kick reduces the cooldown of affected abilities by an additional 1 second. Okay, so I actually rearranged my action bar here because I want to test this out a little bit in practice. I'm kind of curious as to how exactly this is going to go. So, I mean, if we build up a little bit of chi here, I mean, let's summon in our dudes. Let's go for this. And let's start spending. I'm kind of curious where this is going to leave us exactly. I'm not really sure what to expect. Here we go. So this is coming off cooldown really fast. That's cool. I could do my Spinning Crane Kick. That's cool. I can Spinning Crane Kick again. Actually, this came back very quickly. Okay, I mean, I feel like this actually gives you quite a nice little flow to the spec. Obviously, Fist of Fury lasts forever. That's pretty interesting, huh? That's pretty interesting. I kind of like that. I kind of like that a lot. If this would go away, that'd be great. Okay, cool. So that was quite fun. I have to say, that was quite fun. Obviously, our Taika did loads of damage right there. But yeah, I feel like that actually flowed a lot better with the gameplay. I mean, you still, I think, are kind of energy capping a fair bit. I probably should have been paying attention to the weak auras instead of looking at my action bar right there. I'm very rusty. I haven't played Windwalker since looking at it, so apologies for that. But I would say this feels better. We'll see what the tuning actually ends up being. We'll see what it ends up being. But I think that's kind of nice. Obviously, the 30-second buff, I proc that too late. I think you would want to obviously cast this before you do invoke Swen, because Swen lasts for 24 seconds. So pop this, then pop Swen. I think this should be really good for Windwalker, actually. And I don't particularly like the other common abilities for Windwalker. Although, that being said, one final thing to look at here is the Nightfey Covenant has been tweaked, right? It's been tweaked. My voice went very high. Phaline Stomp. So now you strike the ground fiercely to expose a Phaline for 30 seconds, doing 750 nature damage up to 5 enemies, and restoring 750 health to up to 5 allies within 30 yards, actually. So I don't know if they have to be in the Phaline to get healed. Up to 5 enemies caught in the Phaline will suffer an additional 1,768 damage. So there's a massive damage over time component now baked in to people just simply standing in the Phaline. On top of that, your abilities will still have a chance to reset the Phaline. So you're going to be able to build those out. I think you have to fight on the Phaline. One thing that they updated since I think I last looked at Windwalker or Monk in general was that the Phaline now does come out from your feet. So if I show you, It now starts under me, so I begin in the Fey line, which is really nice. Oh, look at that. It did that effect. That's fun. But yeah, so I think that's kind of cool, right? There's a big dot element baked into this now. So this actually does become, I think, as well, a pretty good option for the monk. I think it's still pretty cool. Just spreading those damage over time, essentially floors all over the place. Getting the resets, spreading them around. I think it's pretty nifty. Becomes a lot more appealing. Here we go. We got another reset. Very cool. That got stuck in the wall. But you get the idea. I think it's nice, right? I think it's nice. The damage from the damage over time seems huge. I'd have to double check what the exact numbers tuning was before, but I think that looks very solid. This could be a very, very good damage. Yeah, this could be a pretty good source of damage actually in AoE. So maybe this is the way to go. In fact, for the monk, maybe this is the way to go. Interesting stuff there, guys. Interesting stuff. Over for the priest then. They have a blue post talking about some changes for Shadow Priest, but these don't seem to be implemented yet, as far as I can tell. So just to point them out right now, actually one change that is implemented, which is great, is that Devouring Plague. This was actually implemented last week, right after I did a video on something I did about Shadow Priest. You guys pointed out to me, so thank you for that feedback. But Devouring Plague will now ignite, right? So it works like an ignite. So if I slap. Oh, this is very bugged. Okay. That's very bugged. So if I cast a second Devouring Plague, on top of the initial Devouring Plague, it's going to stack the damage. So let me just generate like a whole bunch of insanity. I think that's the best way to do it. Right. So if I fire off one Devouring Plague, it's ticking. If I fire off a second one, it's now going to not display properly, but it's going to essentially extend the duration. It's going to work just fine. So yeah, basically they're going to overlap. The dots are going to overlap. It's just going to let you cast multiple Devouring... That's the TLDR, is you can now cast multiple Devouring Plagues on the same target, and you're not going to lose any uptime. You're not going to be refreshing the dot too early. It has been updated, at least in the code, to work properly. Of course, you will still want to maintain as high an uptime as possible on Devouring Plague. You don't want to do what I did right there and dump 100 Insanity with 2 Devouring Plagues in a row. That's a bit of a waste. You want to maintain as high an uptime as you can because of your mastery, where you're going to be doing more damage while Devouring Plague is on the target, and of course because of your Dark Thoughts passive as well, where for every damage over time effect on the target, your Mind Flay or Mind Seer have a chance to proc Dark Thoughts. So you want to keep as high, you want to prioritize uptime. But when you do get in those situations where you're generating loads of extra insanity, and you can do 2 Devouring Plagues overlapping each other, it's not going to punish you. So that's cool. Now, on top of that, Void Torrent is going to be updated. Obviously, as you can see, that update is not working, and it's in fact broken right now. So it was previously refreshing Devouring Plague. As you saw when I did it right there, it did not refresh Devouring Plague. So what they're going to do with this now instead is that it's just going to cast Devouring Plague, right? Void Torrent will be a free Devouring Plague on top of doing a big chunk of shadow damage over 4 seconds and also refreshing. I believe it should still refresh your Vampiric Touch and your Shadow Word Pain. I believe. Again, I'm not 100% sure because as you can see, this supposed to be updated version doesn't work. Like if I Void Torrent him, no Devouring Plague to be seen, right? No Devouring Plague to be seen. So that's still bugged. I think that makes it actually pretty good though. Like you can go in on pull and you can do something like you can go in, you can obviously apply your dots, apply Vamp Touch, apply Shadow Word Pain, do your Mind Blast, and then like probably, I don't know, do like Mind Games and fire off a Void Torrent or something like that. That could be really good. Or maybe you want to pop it in Void Eruption. I'm not entirely. You probably do want to pop it in Void Eruption for the extra spell power. I'm not sure exactly what the perfect rotation will be, but I think it's a good change to Void Torrent. Although not as important any. I guess the reason they put this in actually was because of the Ignite. I was going to say, the old Void Torrent, the problem with the old Void Torrent was that it overcapped you on Insanity, which didn't work with Devouring Plague. But now that Devouring Plague ignites effectively, that doesn't actually matter anymore. I guess the issue was that refreshing Devouring Plague doesn't actually work now that Devouring Plague ignites, and that's why they changed it. That makes sense. Figuring things out as we record. They're also going to be getting rid of Legacy of the Void. As you can see, this is also not yet implemented. This is the old Legacy of the Void. It effectively changes your Void form back to BFA Void form, although still on the a 90-second cooldown. They're going to be getting rid of this entirely and putting in a new talent called Hungering Void. There is some data mining which suggests that this Hungering Void talent is going to do something like up the damage of your consecutive Void Bolts on a single target, and possibly do something like whenever Void Bolt crits, it's going to increase the duration of your Void form. So the idea is going to be that this Hungering Void talent, which will go in here, will be a pure single target talent to go alongside Surrender to Madness, which is obviously working with like short-lived mobs, you know, mobs that are going to die within 25 seconds or else you die, so cool. Or Ancient Madness, which is obviously going to work in AoE, so a sort of a pure single target option to go into that talent here. So that's the changes right there. For all the pre-specs then, there's been a massive buff to the Fae Guardian's Covenant ability. That's the Night Fae Covenant ability. So as you can see, the normal effect still is the same. I'll just cover it very quickly. It's the conduit that has changed, right? The normal effect, 1.5 minute cooldown, make 3 Fairy Guardians. Ta-da! For 20 seconds. There's a Wrathful Fairy. So whenever I do, I've got different keybinds. Shadowward Pain. Where is Shadowward Pain? Not on my bars? Not my bars. Okay, cool. There's a Wrathful Fairy that follows my Shadowward Pain. Okay, so my Shadowward Pain. And direct attacks against the target will restore 0.5% of mana or 3 insanity. And that's going to follow my Shadowward Pain. There's a Guardian Fairy, which is going to reduce damage taken by 10%, which is going to follow my Power Word Shield. And there's a Benevolent Fairy, this is the powerful one, which is going to increase the cooldown recovery rate of a major ability by 100%, which will follow my Flash Heal. And now, obviously, one of the big problems that you're noticing with this is you're going, wow, cooldown recovery rate, and you can give that to anybody? That's insanely strong. But it follows Flash Heal. For Disc Priest, it follows Shadow Mend. Well, guess what? In dungeon scenarios especially, they are your main heals. So you're going to be healing, like you have to use those to heal people. You cannot use them with this effect, which means that you're going to be healing the tank. You're going to be spam healing the tank, then you're going to spam healing somebody else, and then jumping back to the tank. You know, like this fairy is going to be bouncing all over the place, and you're never going to be able to put this on the target that you want to put it on most. So for example, let's say there's an Arcane Mage in your group, or there's a Frost Mage in your group. You probably want this to be on the Mage or the Warlock or something like that. These big cooldown burst classes. You weren't going to be able to control that. There is a new conduit to show that to improve this. I'm just going to show you the Wowhead article. I think this is the most clear place to show this. So this is called Fae Fermata. This formerly increased the duration of Fae Guardians up to like 20 seconds, which used to be quite, you know, it was decent. But this new version is more interesting, I think. Your Fae Guardians will leave behind a 60% effective copy of their benefit, lasting 3 seconds when they jump to a new target. Pretty interesting. This goes up to 7 seconds. 7 seconds of leaving that 60% benefit behind at max rank of this conduit. I think obviously the interesting thing about this is obviously for the Holy Priest in a dungeon, you're spamming Flash Heal around on your group. You're going to be spreading like 60% cooldown recovery on their major CDs around all those different players with pretty good uptime. So I think that's quite good for Holy Priest. Interestingly, for all the priests, perhaps with a bit of multi-dotting with Shadowward Pain, you know, you might be able to multi-dot a bit with Shadowward Pain, fire off a few Holy Novas, and get some decent mana back from Wrathful Fairies. I'm not 100% sure if that works. I'm too lazy to test it right now because it seems a fairly minor thing, but it's kind of interesting, perhaps. Interestingly enough, then, for Guardian Fairy as well, this is particularly so, I'd say, a buff for the Discipline Priest, because obviously Rapture, which is not for some reason in the core Discipline Priest thing, that's weird. But Rapture, also a 1.5 minute cooldown, right? Rapture's also 1.5 minute cooldown, and you're going to be spamming out Power Word Shields over 8 seconds. Okay, cool. Great benefit here. These overlap perfectly in their cooldown, and you're going to be spreading that 10% damage reduction. Every new target you Power Word Shield is going to get that 10% damage reduction, but every time you do a new Power Word Shield, you're going to leave a 6% damage reduction for 7 seconds on the last target that you did a Power Word Shield on. I think that's pretty good, actually. That starts to become really, really nice. You know, the cooldown sync up perfectly, so I guess that's a bit of a buff for the Disc Priest as well. So yeah, I think, I'm not sure how insane this is going to be. I feel like, you know, this is obviously a really nice thing for Disc. I think it's even more so a nice thing for Holy Priest in particular. That was very tied into using Flash Heal to heal. Like, at least with the Disc Priest, you could somewhat get away with using Power Word Shield to apply atonements and not casting Shadow Mend. You could get away with that a little bit, but not too much. This just makes it a lot more usable. So that's a big improvement for the Healer Priests in particular. I think not so good for Shadow Priest, where you're really not going to be spamming Shadow Mend on multiple party members. I mean, maybe this will encourage you to do that. That might be a DPS increase. You know, instead of doing a tick of Mind Flay, cast a Shadow Mend. You know, bounce Shadow Mend between the mages in your group or the warlocks in your group. That might be a DPS increase. So that could be kind of bad. But then again, if you're picking this Covenant, you probably like that sort of play. Also, there have been, as you can see, a whole bunch of conduit buffs, major buffs, in fact, to all of the priests. So looking at Shadow first here. Dissonant Echoes now increasing Void Bolt's damage by 35%. And while not in Void form, Mindplay now has a 15% chance to let you cast Void Bolt. That has been increased from 5%. Sorry, so this is just flat damage buff on Void Bolt, and they've increased it from a 5% chance to 15% with Mindflay, which is pretty damn nice. Pretty cool. In Void form, Void Bolt still has a chance to reset the cooldown on Void Bolt, which is a bit clunky because I believe it only procs on the damage application, not on the cast. Maybe they fixed that bug, I'm not sure. But yeah, and then the chances, as you can see, scale up kind of crazy. So this conduit got a major buff. I'm not even sure why, but that's a massive buff. Haunting Apparitions also got a massive buff. Shadowy Apparitions, instead of doing 5% more damage, now do 25% more damage. And at max rank, instead of doing 20%, now do 60% more. So a huge buff. Mind Devourer didn't get as big of a buff, but it in fact got a bit of a nerf. So Mind Blast is going to do 7% more damage and have a 10% chance to make next Devouring Plague cost no insanity. So it starts off at higher damage down below, then it equalizes, and then the damage actually, as you see, gets worse. So you're getting less Mind Blast damage now than you used to be. Of course, the big attraction was the free Devouring Plagues you're going to get out. But yeah, these are some mega buffs, which seems insane. So these conduits are actually very impactful now for Shadow. Looking at Disc first, there's nothing to Holy, no. So for Disc, again, big buffs to their conduits. Exaltation, which formerly just worked with Rapture, now works with Spirit Shell. Spirit Shell is the talent you take to replace Rapture, so that's cool. It's going to make Spirit Shell, I think, yeah, it's going to increase the duration by 2 seconds and make it absorb more, so that's fine. Shining Radiance. Power Word Radiance healing increased by 5%. That's been buffed up to 33%, or from 20% at max rank to about 80%. So that's a massive buff to this conduit. This conduit's now way better than it was before, which is good because it was absolute dog shit before. So that's nice. And Swift Penitence also got massively buffed. It used to increase the damage or healing of the first bolt of penance by 15%. Now it's 25%, up to a max of 60% compared to a former 36%. So again, a massive buff to that. Again, I think these are good changes because these were two very, very underwhelming potency conduits. You really didn't care too much about potency conduits at all as a Disc Priest. I'm not sure if this is enough to care even still, but hey, at least it's something. So there you are. Okay guys, for the sub rogue, one thing of course to note at the start, I think this was updated previously and I missed this last week, I think. But anyway, the Shadow Strike legendary has been nerfed, which was totally expected. So now you're going to do a second Shadow Strike whenever you do a Shadow Strike 2 seconds later at 50% effectiveness, which is totally fair, totally makes sense. This was 100% effectiveness before, so that was obviously totally nuts. Been fixed up. The bigger thing is that you have a new Covenant ability. It's slightly bugged right now. I've been testing it. That's why it's glowing. It is slightly bugged. But this is Flagellation. This replaces Slaughter, which was giving you Slaughter Poison before. So this is a 25-second cooldown. Lash the target with Anima 3 times, doing 386 shadow damage. They remain tormented for 45 seconds, causing a lash for each combo point you spend, dealing 128 shadow damage. Once the target has been lashed at least 25 times, reactivating Flagellation cleanses their torment, increasing your mastery by 10% for 25 seconds. So relatively simply, like assuming that we're going to do combo points around 5 every time, it's going to trigger 5 of these lashes. After 5 combo point spenders of 5, we'll have 25 stacks, and we should be able to reactivate this. This was not working for me when I tried it out, but hey, let's try it out right now. So who knows? Let's pop off our stuff here. Okay, we're gonna start blasting. Actually, we should put this on. Okay, it's already bugged. Oh no, it's not. It's on. Okay, we're good. We're good. It's on. We can start spending our stuff. Sorry, I got a little bit confused right there. No weak auras. Please forgive me. There we go. Fire off some of these abilities. Cool. I need to eviscerate. Okay, we can reactivate. It doesn't work. It's not working. It's not working right there. But we can see in terms of the damage that it's doing, it's pretty terrible, I would say. I mean, 4% plus another 4. I guess it's not bad. It's about 8% damage overall. It looks bad because it's split up into these 2 different sections. It looks bad because it's split into these 2 different sections. But that should go a bit higher. And then, of course, obviously the reactivate thing isn't working right now, but giving you 10% mastery for 25 seconds, that's not bad. That's pretty good. And I assume once you press this, it should just restart the counter, I guess is what it's supposed to do. Like, because it's only a 25-second cooldown ability, right? You can see once this falls off, by the way, the thing is just broken. Like, it doesn't work. Click, click, click. It doesn't work. It's totally busted, right? Yo, reset the ability, please. Okay. It's still kind of busted. But yeah, I mean, it's supposed to have a 25-second cooldown. So you should, in theory, have this up all the time, I guess. So, yeah, interesting, right? Interesting. This should be, for the most part, I think, just some constant damage on a fairly constant mastery buff is my interpretation. I don't know. Like, what do I think about this? Obviously, it's hard to judge in a sense because it is bugged. I will say that it's maybe a little bit underwhelming compared to, like, Bone Spike or the massive burst damage of Sepsis. I don't know. I don't know about this one. Like, your target kind of has to live for the 25 seconds. Like, you need to have enough time to build up the 25 stacks and actually proc this. So they have to live fairly long. That being said, I guess the mastery buff, 10% mastery, that's going to help you in AoE as well, a little bit, I guess. So it's not too shabby. But yeah, I'm not convinced by it, to be honest. I'm not convinced. I definitely would still be leaning towards, I think, Night Fae or the Necrolords for myself personally at the Rogue. The Necrolord thing still hasn't been nerfed as far as I know, so Necrolord's still looking the best. Though I do think that Night Fae with Sepsis does look really good for, like, Assassination in particular. We'll have to see. But yeah, that's Flagellation. Buggy right now. And bonus points as well if you spell it correctly the first time. So that's Flagellation. Over looking at Shaman then. For Elemental Shaman, you guys might have heard this crazy build that was going around where you had a legendary that could proc Ascendance whenever you did Lava Burst. But then Ascendance was doing a free Lava Burst whenever it procced. And then also the Necrolord Covenant ability was doing free Lava Bursts. So you would Lava Burst off your Lava Burst, which would then proc Ascendance, which would proc Lava Burst, which would proc Ascendance. And you could find some hilarious clips up on YouTube, stuff like that, of people just like one-shotting dudes in arena and stuff. It was absolutely absurd. So that has been removed. That's been fixed. That has been fixed. That was obviously a bug. For the Covenant abilities, though, for the Shaman, we also have some tweaks, right? Vesper Totem has been slightly nerfed, so they've slightly reduced the damage that Vesper Totem does. It's slightly worse, and the healing is slightly worse, which is kind of a bummer, actually, because I think that Vesper Totem is a really good, solid Covenant ability. And what to do is to buff up the other Covenant abilities to kind of match it, which they have done, by the way. But anyway, as you can see with Vesper Totem, the next 3 abilities are going to do 750 arcane damage to up to 6 enemies near the totem, and the next 3 healing spells will do 680 healing to up to 6 allies near the totem. In comparison, the Night Fae one has now been buffed, so Fae Transfusion will transfer the life force of up to 4 enemies in the targeted area, doing 7,800 nature damage evenly split to each enemy over 2.8 seconds. So even against one target, this should do that full effect, right? Oh yeah. Oh, that is some big single target damage right there. That is some big single target damage right there. So this has been massively changed. I believe this is now a very good single target damage dealer. However, it is worse in AoE because it's evenly splitting the damage. So I think if there are 4 enemies, it's doing less damage than it did before. But I think if there's 1 to 2 enemies, certainly with 1 enemy, I think even with 2, it's now doing more to substantially more. On top of that, you can press it again within 20 seconds to release 15% of all the damage done as healing to up to 4 allies near yourself. So again, they have changed how many allies that affects. This also gives you a stack of Maelstrom Weapon if you are an enhancement shaman, to make up for the fact that you have to channel as an enhancement shaman, which is kind of punishing. So yeah, I think Fae Transfusion now actually becomes relatively solid. I think you guys can figure out the numbers. Like, are 2 Vesper Totems with the 1-minute cooldown equal to the Fae Transfusion with the 2-minute cooldown? I'm not sure. It does give you big single target burst. I think it's certainly a lot better now. This was previously, I think, a Covenant that was completely written off. So I think it's certainly a buff. It becomes a lot more usable. Chain Harvest also got its damage buffed yet again. So it's now going to do 3,800 damage to every target that it hits, up to 5 targets, and it's going to restore 2,400 health to up to 5 allies. Critical hits obviously reduce the cooldown as well. So Chain Harvest, the damage been buffed again. They also changed it so that it no longer breaks people out of crowd control effects. So it's not going to target things that are like sapped or polymorphed, etc. It's not going to hit those things. So that's good. That is good. But yeah, I think Chain Harvest is personally my favorite one. It's personally my favorite one overall. It's a big chunky Chain Lightning and big chunky Chain Heal combined into one. I think it actually feels pretty good now. Feels pretty good. Finally, with the Necrolords, Primordial Wave is now instant cast to make it a bit more usable, right? So this is instant cast, your 45-second cooldown, blast them with Primordial Wave, doing shadow damage, applying Flame Shock to an enemy or healing an ally. And then the next Lava Burst or your next Riptide or Lightning Bolt for Enhancement Shaman will also hit all targets affected by Flame Shock or your Riptide. It makes your Healing Surge, I think, or Healing Wave for Resto Shaman affect all targets affected by Riptide. It applies a Riptide. So yeah, cool. Instant cast. That makes that a lot more usable. Pretty cool, right? Pretty cool. It also looks like more like a wave, so that's nice. And then you see my Lava Burst. Lots of Lava Bursts. Lava Bursts galore. So, yeah, I think this is a good balancing pass, actually, to be honest with you. On the whole, I think it's a really good balancing pass for the Shaman spec. So, the Necrolord ability, really, really nice. Now, this instant cast that flows really well. It's awesome. It's great. Really good. The Venthyr one is the big cast time, but it does that big chunk of AoE damage and AoE healing. The Night Fae, now not useless. Fae Transfusion, now really good. On like single target scenarios, and even scales up a bit to sort of like it will split the damage in AoE, but it's really good single target burst on a big cooldown. Or then the Kyrian one, slightly nerfed down, but still very good. So yeah, I think the Shaman confidence are actually looking pretty good, pretty good. And finally, the major changes for this week's beta build, then we have the Warlock. So a couple of small tweaks to a couple of covenants. First of all, the Kyrian Scouring Tithe now does slightly less damage. They've nerfed the damage on that. Same thing with the Venthyr ability. I can't remember the name of it now. Impending Catastrophe now also does slightly less damage than it did before. But we've got big changes to the Night Fae and the Necrolords, right? So the Necrolord Covenant was obviously extremely overpowered for the Warlock specs in particular. In particular, for the Affliction Warlock, the nerf has arrived. So, 196 Hurl Bolts, I don't know what the 196 is, but Hurl Bolts of Decimating Magic. So, you do direct damage to your target. Is now only increases the damage of your next Drain Soul. One Drain Soul by 200%. So by default, of course, with Shadow Bolt, it's going to buff 3 Shadow Bolts. With Drain Soul, it's only going to buff a single Drain Soul. In my opinion, that makes an awful lot of sense. You know, like a single Drain Soul takes about the same amount of time to cast as 3 Shadow Bolts. And obviously this is going to be doing more damage as your target's health decreases. So really powerful execute damage. Drain Soul does double damage in execute. So yeah, I think the combination of Decimating Bolt with Drain Soul was too strong. So they've reduced it effectively by 3. And I think it does make sense. They've also reduced its power for the Destruction Warlock, specifically with the Fire and Brimstone talent, which again also makes sense. So for Destruction, it's buffing your next few Incinerates by it's without Fire and Brimstone, it buffs my next 3 Incinerates by 200%. When I take Fire and Brimstone, which is making Incinerate hit all enemies near my target for 40% damage, so massive AoE damage off of that, it only buffs those 3 Incinerates by 80%. The value, as you can see in the tooltip, this value is reduced while using Fire and Brimstone. So again, I think that does make sense just to stop Fire and Brimstone from completely taking over this row. Like Inferno should fit the similar sort of niche as Fire and Brimstone, with like this sort of fire build Warlock, or Cataclysm, again, these AoE things. This is just too strong, so the nerf does make sense. For Demonology Warlock then, it's going to affect Demon Bolt as well as Shadow Bolt. I think they said that they might want to change this to only affect Demon Bolts. So it's going to affect your next 3 Shadow Bolts or Demon Bolts. I think I saw them talking about making this only affect Demon Bolt, which would also be fine. Like, you cast a lot of Demon Bolts as Demonology. Demon Bolt does about twice as much as a Shadow Bolt. Like, Shadow Bolt is 350 damage. Demon Bolt is about 700 damage, right? So you obviously want to use it on Demon Bolt as much as you can. And you should probably plan to do it with Demon Bolts as much as you can. But that's a nice buff for Demonology. Again, a respawn nerf for Affliction, a respawn nerf on Destruction. So yeah, I think a good balancing pass. The only bad thing I have to say about this is that it would have been nicer if this happened sooner in the beta, because this was so obviously overpowered, especially for Affliction. Like, as soon as we saw this on the beta, as soon as it came out, we went, that's OP, and it has been just dominating for Warlock since then. So would have been nicer to change it sooner and test it out, but oh well, at least it's changed now, I guess. And then finally, for the Night Phase, Soul Rot has now been tweaked. So now it does this. No health cost whatsoever. The health cost is now gone, but you wither away all life force of your current target and up to 3 additional targets nearby, making your primary target take 2,600 nature damage, and your secondary target take 1,300 damage over 8 seconds. And for the next 8 seconds, casting Drain Life also makes you drain life from any enemy affected by your Soul Rot. So this suddenly became way better. They added the big buffed effect, double damage to your primary target. So this becomes a lot better in single target or in lower AoE situations. Removing the health cost makes it more usable. So yeah, obviously the Night Fae Covenant, again, much like the Shaman, this one was really completely dismissed as just being terrible for all the specs and you'd never take it. Even for Affliction, where obviously with Affliction, this might even be the best one for Affliction now. I'm not sure. This could be potentially very good for Affliction with Inevitable Demise for some AoE, right? Where Inevitable Demise, you can buff the damage of your next Drain Life. And obviously with this, you can make that Drain Life hit those 4 targets, right? Which is pretty cool. But yeah, this is quite a nice buff to Soul Rot. That's quite good. Really ups the damage output of that. So I think that's a positive change. Like in comparison to the Venthyr one now, like 2,500 damage, slightly under 1,500 to the spread. Venthyr is doing 900, like 1,000 shadow damage in the path and then exploding for 2,200. So they're somewhat similar. I would say this one still seems better for AoE, right? I mean, the dot is longer, so that's something to be aware of. The dot is quite long, but this is going to do a good chunk of damage in AoE, and it's going to apply to your curses as well, which is useful. But this one is no longer as bad in comparison, I would say. This will do probably a bit more damage in single target. It's more about the Drain Life effect. It also has a faster cast time, I think. Yeah, but it doesn't do as much AoE damage. It's really depending on whether or not that Drain Life is worth it. Definitely for Affliction with Inevitable Demise, I think this got a good combo. So there you go, guys. That changes to the Warlocks. There's also a small change to the Warriors. I'm not going to show it, but Colossus Smash and Warbreaker now apply their Mastery in AoE, their Deep Wounds. So that's a nice change. But there you go. Oh, this has been a massive one. So many changes in this week to the Covenant abilities in particular. I think on the whole, this has been a much needed balancing patch. I think it's really good. They buffed up a lot of the weaker Covenants, reworked a lot of those weaker Covenants, especially multiple Night Fae things, which were terrible, have been reworked and really improved, which is good. We'll have to see where the Covenant balance is. I mean, in my opinion, it's definitely not done by any means. By any means not done. I think 2 or 3 more perhaps balancing passes like this are needed before Shadowlands goes live, which is just over a month away now, just over 1 month away. So time is running out, but at least it's good to see them taking steps in the right direction. Let me know what you think about it, especially you guys. You're more expert on your classes than I can be, so I'm trying to look at all the classes, all the specs here. So let me know how this is affecting your specs in particular. Is there anything that's completely insane or anything that's really, really weak and is much worse than it seems? Let me know, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.